We have a few Casper questions. I'm going to kind of read them all. We're going to bundle them into one, and I promise we'll take a look at the Casper chart, which of course has been very disappointing at the end of the show here, but we're going to be talking a bit about the fundamentals. So first question from Joachim4115, what do you think about Casper's future? I mean, in the coming years. Ron, lots of letters here, also ask, how is Casper doing? And non-dualists or Nolendo duels, do you think that Casper is still credible? And these are good questions because we should be asking ourselves, are we in an asset that is still providing something proprietary in this space? Is there still good health and tokenomics? Is the team providing a roadmap and updates? These are things that we should be constantly checking ourselves with any project that we're in, even the large cap ones, the small cap ones, to make sure that we are in a competitive vertical and something that's potentially giving us exposure to something outside of our main bags of exposure. We don't want to be overly diversified, and we'll talk about that with this later question here. But I wanted to talk to you guys a little bit about Casper's main proposition value, and that's going to be their upgradable smart contracts. They approach the smart contract market a lot differently than ETH or Solana, and there's a variety of other L1s out there that offer smart contracts. But the way that you can manage these smart contracts, as well as deploy them with a certain amount of speed and finality, there are big advantages to the Casper network. So talking just a bit about smart contracts 101, just the very basics of what a smart contract is. It's basically a self-executing program that runs on blockchain. Instead of relying on a bank, company, or middleman to enforce the rules, the code automatically executes actions when certain conditions are met. So sending payments when all conditions are fulfilled, whether we're talking about, let's say, a real estate transaction, selling a vehicle, transferring a vehicle, issuing tokens automatically, executing trades without a broker, manage lending and borrowing. This is going to be a very big component in the smart contract conversation over this next decade. And then also verifying ownership of assets. So most of these early smart contracts are designed to be immutable. And for crypto as a whole, that's kind of the holy grail, or at least was the holy grail from the get-go of the most important value proposition that crypto and DLT has to offer. I personally believe that we're finding that there's more value in other types of software and executions of blockchain than just the absolute hierarchy of the most immutable, the most decentralized. Talk a little bit more of that, but these traditional smart contracts are deployed once, they can't be changed, and bugs or upgrades require entirely new contracts. With Casper smart contracts, they can be versioned and upgraded over time while still preserving the same application state and structure. We'll talk more about this. So in real world applications, you deploy a smart contract for whatever it is. You're issuing credentials to an employee on blockchain inside of your organization. You're, like we talked about, RWA transactions. These types of important and sometimes complex smart contracts do need flexibility. And right now there is migration required in order to get to those features or workarounds essentially. So obviously security patches, feature upgrades, compliance updates, that's gonna be very big, and especially the finance world, making sure that you have the ability to apply current compliance standards to an existing contract, governance changes, and long-term maintenance. So most contract change supports upgrades through complicated workarounds, like we talked about, proxy contracts, delegating calls, or governance wrappers. So these are like secondary tools that we're deploying after the fact to try to correct, either issues or bugs in previous contract issuance, or sometimes just the mistakes that were made in previous contracts. Casper builds upgradability directly into the protocol architecture itself, cleaner contract management, easier maintenance, more predictable upgrades, and reduced engineering complexity. This is always going to be a big takeaway too, is you can have a great program. If you require even the developer to go above and beyond what they're familiar with, or what the everyday norm is for maintaining contracts, upgrading contracts, you're going to have a long-term better time attracting developers to a network that's easier to build on, so less complex, right? And we're achieving this through WebAssembly or WASM instead of traditional EVM execution, faster execution, greater development flexibility, support for modern languages like Rust, and easier onboarding for enterprise developers. Big takeaway here as well when we're thinking about the big picture of what upgradable smart contract actually means is the separation of logic and state. So on many EVM chains, upgrades can become dangerous because changing contract logic may accidentally corrupt storage. Corrupt files, we've lost the value of blockchain as a whole, right? Casper's architecture was designed to be separate application logic and application state, helping reduce the risk to upgrades and storage collisions. So there is a trade-off though, right? This isn't a zero-sum game. Upgradable smart contracts introduce important philosophical trade-off. Immutable contracts maximize decentralization because nobody can change the rules later. Upgradable contracts introduce governance considerations. Who controls the upgrades? Are administration keys secure? Is governance decentralized? And can users trust future changes? To me personally, this is a conversation that continues to evolve no matter what protocol or network we're talking about, is the balance of decentralization but then also with efficiency. When we're all thinking about, let's talk about scalability for a moment here. We think about Ethereum, which has a great smart contract platform, right? They're very good smart contracts. Most people have learned to code in the main languages like Solidity that are written in for Ethereum. But when we think about time to finality and what the cost of that is, you're going to have somewhere between a 12 to 15 minute window before you have true finality on the Ethereum network. Now you can look at probabilistic and say, okay, but more likely it'll be finalized by this time. But when we're talking about big items, RWA, we're not going to get away with, probabilistic. We want absolute finality. So you look at what the Casper network's done, even with this 2.1 upgrade, you have reduced the block time and time to finality down to about 8 seconds, with most transactions moving closer to that 4-second mark, but still within 8 seconds, that's complete finality. So we do have a slightly less decentralized platform to some extent, because the smart contracts themselves are not completely immutable, because you can make adjustments and upgrades. Now, that doesn't mean that there can't be other security features or other things that can lock certain pieces of information into the contract. For example, we're talking about a mortgage or a car loan or something like that. There's ways to hard code certain types of information into contracts and make those unmovable objects, but having the ability to modify or make adjustments or add additional features, especially as new things come on, right? We need to have additional compliance stamps that weren't required at the time when the document was originally recorded. We have to sometimes retroactively apply that data to smart contracts. So instead of having to migrate users to new versions and essentially doing away with the old contract, or having to do a workaround to have the contract still valid, but interacting with the more recent protocol upgrades, let's say we're talking about Ethereum, there is a cost to that. And I personally believe that long-term, the tech that Casper is offering is a very clean integration that truly does make smart contract deployment and management probably one of the absolute best in the space right now. As far as volume though, right, we can look at the stats. There's not a ton of activity on the Casper network right now. We've had our ups and downs as far as partnerships are concerned, and some confusion in the community, frustration with a pause in the network at one point to go back to Genesis block to correct what needed to be corrected. But for the most part, we haven't had any value stolen off the Casper network. You have a lot of value that's there right now in relations to a working DeFi platform, NFT marketplace, being able to provide liquidity and liquidity pairing for multiple pairs, unlisted tokens. All the ingredients, in my opinion, are here for it. The volume and the existing partnership volume is not where most people want to see it. So I think that when you think about crypto as a whole, first of all, we're barely recovering right now. We are going to be taking a look at the charts here at the end, like I mentioned. But we're seeing, first of all, a renewed interest in some assets out there, a little bit of excitement, but it's still not where it was even, let's say, a year and a half ago. When we start to see price pick back up a little bit just across the board, and you start to see some of these smaller cap projects climb the ranks, especially in thinking that Casper's around 50 million right now. You've got API 3 well below 100 million right now. Plenty of assets that are below that mark. Once they start climbing the ranks and people start to pay attention, those bring listings, those start to bring excitement. And hopefully within those cycles, you start to get enough people building and excited on the network that it attracts more attention. And you get that growth over time. That's one of the toughest things I think about investing in DLT and crypto as a whole, is everyone wants all of the confirmations all at once, but we're kind of making money based on anticipating the fact that this technology is likely undervalued, right? I hope that we think that we're buying technology for the most part that is undervalued, because if we believe that we're buying fair market value, it's not going to appreciate very fast, right? We're not going to get truly, the growth that we expect out of the space if all of the ingredients were in front of us and we had everything working together perfectly, all the integrations and partnerships that we wanted. So not making excuses for gas by any means. It has been one of my absolute worst ROIs so far as everything that's in my portfolio. At one point it wasn't. There's other things in my portfolio right now that are actually in profit that were my worst ROIs. So I'm going to continue to be patient with my Casper investment. Have no plans on getting rid of it, especially not at these prices. I'm leaving everything in the staking protocol, classic proof of stake model, and I'm just letting those rewards work for me. And I have a multi-step TP plan that I think that even if we fall short of our expectations, still breeds an incredible profit, reduces risk, and allows for long-term exposure. That's my bit on Casper. Let's move on to another question here.